If you're a dog breeder and you don't know how to differentiate yourself in today's market, you will fail. My job is to make sure you understand how to escape market conditions and create a business that no matter what's going on, you can sell, and more importantly, you can serve. With that being said, in today's masterclass, we're gonna dive deep into branding and give you a perspective that you've never heard before.
So me being a new breeder, new to the game, what does success really look like?
That's a really good question. So for me, I wanna ask you, what does success look like? Because for some breeders, they have a passion for the business and the goal is to create a full-time, you know, like business and really just doing that full-time entrepreneur. For others, they're looking at it from a perspective of, I want to create the best dog in the world. In my opinion, success is a combination of both, where you're improving your breed and you're able to be rewarded for doing that because you have the right systems and business model in place. But in order for me to answer your question to the best of my ability, I want to really get to know what you believe success looks like 3 years down the line.
For me, having a reputation for producing great puppies, healthy puppies that go to family homes or even people who are looking to breed them, and they can get out of that puppy exactly what they want. You know, I want to deal with my customer base on a personal level. And like I said, really build those relationships with people. And I want to be a trusted figurehead in the American Bully breed.
I love that.
So where when people come to me, they know they're getting quality.
So it sounds like the biggest things for you are relationships, reputation, and productions. Would you say that's accurate?
Yes, sir.
Okay, cool. So the reason why you want to kind of put these things in their own categories because they all require certain levels of, you know, understanding. For production, your ability to produce quality dogs time and time again is based on your ability to understand the standard of your breed. So like, how can I make sure that when I'm pairing these dogs together, I'm not just guessing and rolling the dice, but I understand their genetic potential or their alleles and the different traits they have to create the outcome that you want. Because a lot of breeders in today's age don't go as far, at least within the bully breeds, to test and make sure that whatever they're producing is predictable, consistent, and healthy, right? So what happens is when we breed to the standard and we actually do our due diligence from a pheno standpoint and a geno standpoint, what happens is this carries right back into our reputation. So reputation comes from your breedings, and it also comes from how you do business. And it's so funny, right? Because we're talking about the breeding business, but you have two different things that you have to combine in a very intentional way to get the outcome you want, which is how am I conducting my breedings and how am I conducting my business to create better relationships with my clients? How can I make sure the service I deliver is not only better than industry standard, but I'm able to actually make them feel an affinity with me, which means like a real desire to be in connection with me, my brand, and my program. So what I usually see when people are trying to develop themselves with their brand or their reputation or their productions is they're looking at what I always say is not the right way, the market. They say, hey, I'm going to base what I do with my breeding program on the market. I'm going to do business based on what I see happening in the market. And they expect this to set the tone for everything up here. But the problem is that when you follow the market, you end up commoditizing yourself. Now, what does that mean? Commoditizing yourself simply means that you are not different from anybody else. So if you're not different from anybody else, somebody can look at you and the next person and say, okay, well, he's charging $5,000, but because he's not different from this person over here who's charging $4,000, I'm going to go with them. And then for them, somebody will look at them and they'll say, he's not different from the person over here who's charging $2,000. So I'm not going to go with him. I'm going to go with them. And so that's the trend we see in the industry. But the problem is not the market. It's not that there's a lack of people wanting to buy a dog. The problem is that breeders are trying to go off of what they see happening already, and they don't think about What what is unique to you that only you can bring to the table? What is the purpose of your program? What are you looking to showcase with your dogs, with yourself, with your family, with whatever you want to bring to the table that would not only separate you, but essentially put you in your own lane, right? Because so many people don't think outside the box. Your job as a new breeder looking to create success is to define what success looks like to you. Because what success looks like to me may not be success for you, right? Like I said, there's so many different definitions of success for breeders, whether it's creating a specific phenotype and physical appearance for these dogs, or it's getting them to think a certain way and breeding that into their line where they're protective or they're family oriented and it's the temperament. There's so many different little niches that you can tap into that you can make it impossible for somebody to copy you because nobody can duplicate your purpose, right? And that's so important to know because if you're just getting started, somebody else online or somebody that you may see posting some cool content will have you thinking that their way is the only way. That's not it. Your way, what you're coming into this for, what authentic passion you have is your superpower, right? Your ability to create your own lane is what is going to make it to where when you look at the market, you don't have to worry about market conditions to where you're not pricing based on what you see the market looking at. You price based on what you do uniquely with your standard, meaning that you're improving your breed in a unique way that translates to how you conduct your breedings, that also translates to how you go about your business. Because guess what? You're in a position where if you are starting your program and you're creating a breeding program that ultimately wants to serve families and have a specific dog that goes to these families. I know you mentioned breeders as well, but because you're creating your own lane, your ability to create a customer profile is extremely important because guess what? Not everybody wants what you bring to the table, but there are some people that want exactly what you have. And because there are more people that, let's say, for instance, well, I won't say more, but let's say there's specific profiles out there that you can speak to directly that want what you do, there's an infinite amount of people you could supply, technically, with the amount of supply you'll have, because the level of demand will always be higher than supply. But because breeders base what they do on the market and not what they want to serve, how they want to serve people in their own individual lane, they're stuck in a position where they're chasing trends, they're hoping it works out, and there's really no predictable success. It's just them rolling the dice, hoping things click. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
100%. What else you got for me?
So stepping into the piece about, creating your own lane, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you go about creating that vision without necessarily, doing too much, for lack of a better way of saying it? You know what I'm saying? Because we talk about breed standard, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I don't want to just go out here and say, well, I want my dogs to have the biggest head, because chasing that could potentially get me unhealthy dogs. You get what I'm saying? So the question would be, how do I go about making a plan to differentiate myself?
It's a really good idea. So first and foremost, you want to kind of have a clear understanding with your program. Like, this is why research before you buy a dog is so important, because you have to understand, what does the perfect dog look like to you? And so if you're like, okay, this is exactly what I want, then you're going to find different dogs that portray that same physical appearance. Now, there's different things you need to look for in those dogs, because it's not just physical. It's also, well, it is physical, but there's external, which is what you see on the outside. And then you have the internal, which is their real health, right? Where we look at organizations like OFA or organizations like Embark and Wisdom Panel to be able to say, hey, this is what I need to look for regarding the health of the dog. Now, if you're just getting started and you're in a position where you're really trying to make sure that the investment you make is optimal, it's going to pay off, etc., the best thing you can do before you invest is make sure that the external is there, but you have the highest likelihood of the internal being there as well. Sometimes, especially in breeds like bullies, where health testing is not common, you're going to need to make sure you at least have assurances that the breeder who sells you a puppy is giving you guarantees to where if it doesn't turn out a certain way, you're guaranteed to be able to do X, Y, and Z, right? You want to be able to have some level of risk aversion, so that way you're not liable for things you didn't plan for. So when it comes down to really just planning your program out and really creating the look you want, first you need to understand what is ideal for your program, not only from a physical appearance, but what do you want to accomplish with your breed, which really, and we'll just call it like, I want to use the P, which is, what is your purpose for your dogs? So I know that maybe on the physical, I have the external and the internal down, but does this dog carry what it is that I'm looking to improve? Let's say, for instance, yes, I want a specific look, but are we considering another factor? Like, what do we want this breed to actually, what's the purpose of it, right? Is this dog going to be family oriented? So that means you have to take temperament into account, right? What type of environment is it raised in? How can I make sure that it fits within my lifestyle? Because I see sometimes people get breeds that don't correlate with where they live. It's like, imagine somebody living in Alaska, super cold. I'm not really familiar with the environment, but let's just say, for instance, they get a Frenchie and then they have it living outside. And I don't know if that's, good or bad in the sense of what Alaska really looks like, but just imagine it's cold all the time. That dog really can't survive in that environment. Or a dog that has brachycephalic syndrome and they're living in Las Vegas and they live outside during the summer, right? Those breeds don't fit your conditions. So it's like, how can I make sure that in selecting the breed that I'm choosing, I not only set myself up for success by making sure whatever I invest in is healthy on the outside, but looks like what I want on the external, and it's an improvement to my breed, meaning that it's taking the breed in the right direction. If you don't know the standard before you invest and you buy something that you hope will turn out to be a certain way, but you really don't know your breed like that, you're liable to regret your purchase and your investment because you don't know what it's supposed to look like, right? And then once you start to get educated, you're already in the hole because you spent X amount of dollars and you're like, man, I was hoping that this turned out that way, but it didn't because you didn't know, right?
Right.
So we have purpose, physical appearance, internal health, and we also have the overall understanding of what you're looking to create long-term. That's why planning and research and really developing the foundation for your breeding business is way more important in the beginning of your program than actually investing in just trying to get a return as soon as possible. Because if you get started fast, the best saying is, if you take shortcuts, you will get cut short, right?
Right.
But if you end up planning things out, there's a really good saying or statement by Andy Grove, worked with Intel a long time ago. He said that usually, what's up, Breedwise fam? If you're watching this video and you're getting value, the most valuable thing that you can do for us is subscribe to the channel. We really appreciate it. And there's a lot more value on the way. Stay tuned in, stay tapped in. Let's get back to the video. It might have been Andy Grove or Ben Horowitz, but they said that usually when there's gaps in business and you see things start to fall apart, it's because there was a lack of planning in the beginning. And it takes so much more time and effort later on to fix that than it would have if you would have just taken it into account at the beginning of your program. And so many breeders, unfortunately, don't do that, which leads them down a path where they have to continue to try and get themselves in a better position, right? They start with a vision to go up, but because they don't plan, they end up going like this, hope that they can get up. But usually it doesn't happen because this requires so much more effort than just going up naturally. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. So let's touch on the first part of what you were saying in dealing with breeders from an aspect of purchasing a pup, right?
Yeah.
How do you guarantee, you talk about those fail safes, right?
Yeah.
How do you incorporate that in the deal you're making?
Yeah. So, I mean, the biggest thing is making sure, regardless of who you're doing business with, it could be your brother, whatever the case may be, contracts. So contracts, understanding what you should be protected against. Now, for certain breeds, like what you're getting into, the XL bully, they have predispositions to specific health issues, right? Where certain things a breeder can do their best to prevent. However, there is no guarantee because of the fact that it is a commonality within the breed. But what they can do is, if you are buying a dog with breeding rights, is make sure that in the case and scenario that said thing presents itself, they take care of you to rectify whatever, so that way you're in a position where you don't feel like you took a massive loss. The reason why this industry has a bad taste in its mouth for the most part is because when individuals get started and they make an investment, if that investment doesn't end up panning out and they put their life savings in it, the breeder is off somewhere with the money, or like is not trying to communicate with them to take care of them. And that person, if they were guided in the beginning of their journey, would have been so much better off just knowing what to do before they invested, because then they would have been protected. So first and foremost, you want to make sure that you're working with people who genuinely have an interest in taking care of you and building that relationship with you. Because if somebody is just trying to sell you a dog, but they don't care about you as an individual, or you can tell that there's really no real rapport, I would stray away, because that individual has very little incentive to make sure that you're successful. If they're overly breeding, if they're overpopulating, if they're having like 10 litters a year, 15 litters a year, what's the likelihood that they're able to give you individually the attention you need to help you make sure you're on the right track, right?
Right.
Those are little things that you want to analyze. And we started to see this year over year, that people who produce way more and don't have as much quality usually not only see a decrease in pricing regardless of market conditions, because they have so much quantity that they've commoditized themselves, but they don't have the ability to deliver the level of customer service that they should at the price that they think they should be getting, right? And that's why the industry gets a bad rep. So for you, in making sure that you have fail safes, is, hey, what's in the contract? I know that this breed can have X, Y, and Z. I just want to make sure I'm safe. Are they willing to have that conversation with you and take into account what that would potentially look like? And how consistent have they been throughout the entire process with you? Has it been before the sale, they're very, very good, and then as soon as you're about to pay, things shift a little bit? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, how consistent are they? And this is why it takes time to really develop relationships, to understand who you're working with. Because I always say it, going into business with anybody is like a marriage. Obviously, your breeder is not your business partner, because you're investing and getting the dog and you do your own thing. But because of the fact that you're buying from somebody, you're essentially purchasing their vision, and you're purchasing what it is that they've already started, and you're saying, hey, I'm signing up to follow your lead because I'm investing in your program. And so whatever you intended to do with this blood, whatever you intended to do with your plan, I think I'm basically, by investing, saying that I agree with this. I want that too, right? Because you wouldn't invest in it if it was any other way. But you take that in, and now you got to make sure that you know what to do and that the person you're buying from is in the corner. So contracts is the key. Making sure you have specific terms in the contract that protect you, protect the breeder. That's a prerequisite. I would not do business with anybody if they don't want to have their name signed on a dotted line. Make sure that you have the ability to protect yourself in the case and scenario that future reference, something does happen with the puppy, you're in a position where you're taken care of, and that the breeder communicates with you from the very beginning that, hey, this is something that I'm going to take care of you. They make it very plain, if that makes sense.
Right. Right.
100%.
So if you were going out to purchase a puppy, which we know you established, you ain't got to do that type of stuff anymore. What is it you're looking at? You know, let's say you went to pick a puppy up 10 weeks, right?
Yeah.
What do you want to see out that puppy at that point that makes you say, okay, this is a keeper? Because of course, you know, we're dealing with real lives. They grow, they develop.
Yeah.
So I feel like you're trying to predict what they'll be. So what are some of those things that you really look at that makes you say, okay, that's a good investment?
I really like that question. So there's a few things, right? This is why it's so important to really understand the plan you have for your program, because you're going to base it on a few factors. First and foremost, you're going to look at the standard, and you're going to say, how close does this puppy stand when it comes down to breed standard? Now, we have to take into account that the puppy will develop and it will go through its changes, and you cannot say that this is what it's going to look like when it gets to this age, right? There's different things that we have to take into account. But what you can do, look at the puppy from this standpoint versus its litter mates. So you're able to see, what does this puppy have versus the litter mates? How is the top line, the rear angulation, the hocks, the paws, the overall spread? And this is just speaking to the bully language, but for other breeds, they're looking at different things, right? Also temperament. How does this puppy act? Is it calm? Is it overhyped? Is it, does it present the qualities I want in a puppy? Because and this is another thing, seeing the puppies in person is extremely important. So that way you're able to see, how do these puppies operate, whatever the case may be, right? And also meeting parents, stuff like that. And I believe you're already doing that, which is really good, right? But you're looking at the standard, you're looking at temperament, you're looking at structure, which is the standard, but you're looking at it on that puppy versus litter mates. And you're looking at the health of parents. And you ask what you look at when you're choosing a pup. I think that what you and it came naturally for me to have the eye, but because of the fact that you have to really start looking at different things, you're gonna get more experience as you get around puppies more and start like having litters. You're gonna see ones that have a lot of potential at the beginning, what you think would be a good pick, what's not, and you'll be able to start having discernment. Like I've had puppies I've picked day one, I'm like, that's the one, and they turn out to be the one. You know what I'm saying? Because I have and I don't want to say it, maybe that's just luck. I don't know. But I have a good eye, I'd say. You know what I'm saying? But when it comes down to just choosing your puppy, I think the biggest thing is really looking at your standards for your breeding program. Does it fit what you're looking for? The temperament, the structure versus the litter mate, the health of the parents, what you can expect, and then also really just being observant and intentional. So that way you're able to look at, because this is like chess, right? This move is going to set the tone for the rest of the game. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Let me ask you this, right?
okay.
Let's talk about Merrill dogs for a minute.
Okay.
Are there anything you do? Because of course I've heard people say, that a Merrill dog technically has like a skin condition.
Yeah.
You've heard the negative things about that. Are there anything you do for Merrill dogs specifically to prevent any potential issues, or are those things just kind of made up?
It's a really good question. So what I really like for you to do, and I'm excited for you because you have access to geneticists through Breedwise Academy, where you're able to ask those questions to somebody that can speak to the actual science. For me, of course, I'm aware of the breed and more importantly, the Merle, but I want to make sure in terms of an in-depth answer, you're able to get a real good grasp. From what I know and ultimately what is, you can't breed Merle to Merle, of course. Right. When it comes down to the overall Merle, in my experience, they do have some skin conditions in the sense that allergies present themselves a little bit more frequently than other dogs. As far as what you can do in those cases and scenarios, it's really just extra maintenance. So for you, in terms of, caring for a Merle dog that has skin conditions, I mean, medicated baths and stuff like that is typically what you do, but it also correlates with their diet. So usually when you're starting to see skin conditions or different allergic reactions, you can base it off of a few things. I think they are a little bit more sensitive in that aspect, but there are panels that you can do with your veterinarian to test for allergies to see what specifically will make them react. And then you can counteract that based on your knowledge of that dog. And guess what? As you start to produce dogs in your program or have different, females, males, etc., you can look at those things and really start to make educated decisions as to who you should pair and who you shouldn't pair based on those little things, right? Because think about it like this. Some people neglect that and they just look at the dog from a physical standpoint, but they're not thinking about the things that will actually become vet bills in the future, which are the allergy things that you can control and solve naturally, right? Those are different areas where you're really going to want to make sure you have a plan in place. But the more data we have, which is looking at tests, really making decisions based on the information we know from the dog specifically, whether it's the health test, the genetic test, the allergy test, blood test, all of these things are data. Our ability to understand that data and translate it into education or educated decisions is essentially where we find the gaps in the breeding industry right now, because breeders, if we understand, we can make informed decisions that not only increase our chance of having higher success, but also decrease our losses like heavy vet bills, because we've prevented these things from happening based on what we know instead of trying to avoid the vet. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So, where are you on the whole raw versus kibble debate?
It's a really good question. The biggest thing for me with Breedwise Academy, bro, is to make sure that I got the people who speak to these things in place and in position, because there's so much of a deeper insight regarding these topics like nutrition and geneticists that I personally, as somebody that is also learning in those areas, would want to make sure you have aspects that are not just what a breeder's personal experience is, but the actual science, right? Because I can tell you what I've experienced based on my dogs. I've seen the dogs that I fed raw, ultimately get not only bulky, but the muscle definition, their poop gets smaller. There's different benefits and it's incentives to do it. And then when you have kibble, of course, when you have a bigger program, it's more cost effective. But of course, we're thinking about the health of the dog and those benefits. But the biggest thing I would say is Breedwise Academy is the way to really get the science and the business. You know what I'm saying? Okay. Good master class, my guy. So Hey, what's up, Breedwise fam? I hope you enjoy this video, learning about branding and ultimately how to differentiate yourself in the market. If you want to learn more about what we're doing here at Breedwise to revolutionize the dog breeding industry, click this video right here and you'll see a little bit of behind the scenes.